Have you ever wondered why we live by rules? Why we have governments, laws, and even unspoken social codes? It wasn't always this way. For the earliest humans, life was pure chaos. There was no control over nature, no control over others, and barely any control over one's own primal urges. Survival was a moment-to-moment battle, dictated by brute strength, raw fear, and split-second decisions. Imagine a world with no leaders, no laws, just the constant, unpredictable dance of instinct. It was a dangerous and exhausting way to live. But as human groups grew, a powerful realization began to dawn. Pure chaos was unsustainable. Constant conflict from within was just as deadly as any predator lurking outside. Unchecked violence didn't make a group stronger. It tore it apart, leaving it vulnerable. Survival, the very force that drove this chaos, now demanded something new. It demanded order. And so, the first seeds of control were planted, not out of kindness, but out of sheer necessity. This initial control was blunt and brutal. It was the control of dominance. The strongest individuals used fear to enforce a semblance of peace. The group, desperate for stability, accepted this hierarchy. It was a trade-off. Surrender some personal freedom to gain a little bit of predictability and safety. This was the first, primitive step away from anarchy. Leaders emerged not because they were wise or just, but because they were powerful enough to stop the fighting. This wasn't about building a better society. It was about surviving the next day. Over thousands of years, this raw dominance began to evolve. Simple rules became traditions, whispered from one generation to the next. Traditions then hardened into the first laws. It's crucial to understand that violence didn't just vanish. Instead, it became regulated. Power was no longer just about who could hit the hardest. It became structured. Who had the right to punish? Who had the authority to lead? These questions started to have answers, creating the framework for early societies. Control was becoming more sophisticated. As these societies expanded, so did their ambition for control. Humans learned to control the land through agriculture, bending nature to their will. They learned to control people through organized governance and social structures. And most profoundly, they learned to control behavior through shared morals, religion, and education. The wild, untamed instinct that once ruled every action was slowly being replaced by a complex system of order. The chaos of the individual was tamed by the authority of the collective. This incredible journey from raw instinct to organized civilization is the story of us. What started as a desperate scramble for survival transformed into the complex systems of governance, law, and social etiquette we live with today. We still grapple with the balance between freedom and order, instinct and reason. But understanding how and why we first created control reveals a fundamental truth about humanity. We are the species that chose to build a cage of rules, not to trap ourselves, but to protect ourselves from the chaos within. The first topic is life before control. Imagine a world without any rules. No laws, no leaders, no one to tell you what to do. This isn't a fantasy of freedom. It was the reality for our earliest ancestors. For thousands of years, human life was a raw, unfiltered battle for survival, governed purely by instinct. Before the idea of control ever took root, our world was a chaotic place. The only goal was to see the next sunrise. Food wasn't in a grocery store. It had to be hunted or gathered, with no guarantee of success. Shelter wasn't a given. It was a constant search for a safe place to rest, away from predators and the elements. Every single day was a gamble. Nature was the ultimate, unpredictable force. A sudden storm could wipe out a food source. A harsh winter could mean starvation. But the dangers weren't just from the wild. Other humans were just as unpredictable and often just as dangerous. To survive, early humans formed small, tight-knit groups. Think of them as families or small bands, huddling together for warmth and protection. But even these groups were fragile. Cooperation existed, but it was limited. Without any shared rules or long-term plans, conflicts were frequent and brutal. Imagine two hunters spotting the same animal. Who gets it? Today, we might have rules or social norms. Back then, it was often settled by strength. Disagreements over food, territory, or who should lead could explode into violence in an instant. There was no police force, no court, no elder council to mediate. The only law was the law of the jungle. Might makes right. In this primal state, every decision was driven by immediate needs. Hunger dictated the hunt. Fear dictated where you slept. Opportunity dictated your actions. The concepts we hold dear today, like fairness, justice, or responsibility to a wider community simply didn't exist. Your circle of trust was tiny, extending only to your immediate group. Anyone outside that circle was a potential threat, a competitor for scarce resources. Life was also incredibly inefficient. All the energy spent on internal squabbles and fighting off rival groups was energy that couldn't be used for hunting, building better shelters, or passing down knowledge. It was a cycle of conflict that kept human progress locked in a state of constant struggle. As human populations slowly began to grow, this lack of structure became more than just inefficient. It became a threat to our very existence. The chaos created by unchecked human behavior was becoming more dangerous than any predator lurking in the shadows. Groups that couldn't manage their internal conflicts simply fell apart. They were either torn apart from within or easily conquered by more unified neighbors. But slowly, a powerful realization began to dawn on our ancestors. They started to see that pure, unrestrained instinct was a recipe for self-destruction. This was a crucial turning point in human history. The birth of control wasn't a grand philosophical debate about morality or kindness. It was a cold, hard survival strategy. It was a practical solution to a deadly problem. Humans began to understand, through brutal trial and error, that putting limits on individual behavior could actually strengthen the group. Even the simplest, most basic rules like a system for sharing a large kill or respecting another family's sleeping area drastically reduced internal conflict. This freed up mental and physical energy for things that truly mattered for long-term survival. Life before control was raw, violent, and unpredictable. But it taught us the most important lesson in our history, that survival requires more than just individual strength. It requires coordination. It requires restraint. And most of all, it requires a shared understanding that we are stronger together than we are apart. This fundamental realization wasn't just about avoiding chaos. It was the very first step on the long road to building the complex societies we live in today. It was the moment we began to tame our own nature, laying the foundation for everything from the first village to the modern city. The story doesn't end there. Of course, the evolution from simple rules to complex laws, from tribal leaders to governments, is a fascinating journey in itself. The second topic is fear as the first authority. Have you ever wondered where the idea of authority comes from? Before kings, before laws, before even written language, what was the first thing that brought order to human society? The answer might surprise you. It wasn't reason, or love, or mutual agreement. It was fear. Imagine a small, early human group living a precarious existence. In T's word, the strongest, the most intimidating individual had the most influence. This wasn't a leader chosen by a vote. It was an authority figure who emerged through sheer dominance. If you could punish someone, you could control them. If you could protect them from threats, they would follow you. This was authority in its rawest form. And it worked because it was simple and brutally effective. The threat of a painful consequence was a powerful motivator. It discouraged behavior that could harm the group, like stealing food or starting a fight. Disobeying the dominant individual had immediate, tangible results, and everyone understood the rules without needing them written down. This fear-based system, as harsh as it sounds, was the first step away from pure chaos. It reduced internal conflict and forced people to restrain their impulses to avoid punishment. Slowly, a sense of order began to replace the constant struggle for survival. This dynamic naturally created a hierarchy. At the top were those who could enforce their will, and below them were those who learned to obey. It was a trade-off. In exchange for their obedience, the group received a degree of safety and stability. A group that accepted this kind of authority, even if it was based on fear, was more likely to stick together, defend itself, and survive than a group with no structure at all. Control, even through intimidation, proved to be more efficient than constant, unpredictable violence. As these small bands of humans grew into larger tribes, this fear-based control had to evolve. A single leader couldn't watch everyone all the time, so they started surrounding themselves with loyal supporters and inner circle that helped enforce the rules. This made authority more organized and consistent. It was no longer just about one person's physical strength. It was about the power of a coordinated group. Authority became less personal and more of a structured system. But fear wasn't always about the threat of physical harm. A crucial shift happened when social consequences became just as powerful. The fear of being cast out from the group, of being shamed, or losing the protection of others was a potent tool for control. This meant that people started to regulate their own behavior, even when the leader wasn't physically present. The authority figure was no longer just an external threat. A version of that authority started to exist inside everyone's mind. This internalization of control was a revolutionary step for humanity. People began to police themselves. This self-regulation led to more predictable behavior, which is the foundation of cooperation. When you can generally predict how others will act, you can start to plan for the future. You can work together on complex tasks, like a large hunt or building a shelter. Trust, a fragile but essential ingredient for society, could slowly begin to grow within the group. It's easy to look back and judge this system as primitive and cruel. And in many ways, it was. It wasn't fair, and it wasn't just. But it was effective. It was the mechanism that transformed random, chaotic violence into a structured system of punishment and order. It was the first tool that allowed humans to overcome their most basic, selfish instincts and live together in increasingly larger and more complex groups. Think about it. This early form of control laid the groundwork for everything that followed. The concept of a leader who sets rules. The idea that actions have consequences. The understanding that personal freedom is sometimes limited. For the good of the group, all of these fundamental principles of civilization have their ancient roots in the authority of fear. From the intimidating stare of a tribal strongman grew the idea of chieftains, kings, and eventually, governments. The unwritten rules enforced by threats evolved into codes of conduct, traditions, and finally, written laws. The fear of punishment was the seed from which the entire concept of justice, however imperfectly, would eventually grow. So, the next time you stop at a red light, even when no one is around, you might be participating in a behavior that is thousands of years old. That internal voice, telling you to follow the rule, that sense of order, is a distant echo of our earliest ancestors learning to control themselves. Not just out of fear of a policeman, but out of an internalized understanding that rules create the stable world we all depend on. Fear was the harsh teacher that first taught us how to be human, together. The third topic is from strength to leadership. Have you ever wondered why we follow leaders? Why isn't it just the strongest person in the room who gets to be in charge anymore? It's a fascinating journey that takes us back to the very roots of human society, a time when might made right, but not for long. Picture this. Early human groups, small and scattered. In these tight-knit communities, control was simple and brutal. The strongest individual, the one who could physically dominate everyone else, was the one who called the shots. Authority was earned through intimidation and fear. If you could overpower others, you were the leader. This system worked, but only to a point. It was a rule of muscle, a constant show of force to keep everyone in line. But as these groups began to grow, a major problem emerged. Raw strength alone just wasn't enough anymore. Think about it. One person, no matter how strong, can't be everywhere at once. How could a single dominant figure manage a group of 50, 100, or even more? How could they organize a large-scale hunt, decide where to migrate for the winter, or defend against a rival tribe all by themselves? The system of control based purely on fear and physical power started to show its cracks. It was inefficient, chaotic, and couldn't handle the growing complexity of human life. Constant intimidation created a tense, unstable environment where the only thing that mattered was not getting on the wrong side of the alpha. This couldn't last. For our ancestors to survive and thrive, something had to change. A new form of control was needed, one that was smarter, more organized, and could unite people instead of just scaring them into submission. This was the moment that leadership, as we know it, began to take shape. The big shift happened when our ancestors realized that organized control was far more effective than brute force. Instead of relying on one person's ability to intimidate, groups began to value coordination. This is where the concept of a true leader emerged. A leader wasn't just the scariest person around. They were the one who could direct the group's efforts for the benefit of everyone. They were the ones who decided the best time to hunt, the safest place to build a new camp, and the smartest way to handle threats from predators or other groups. Suddenly, authority wasn't just about who could win a fight. It started shifting towards those with influence, valuable experience, and the ability to make good decisions. Of course, the first leaders were often still the strongest or most feared individuals. Physical prowess was still a huge advantage, but over time, other qualities started to matter more. The person who was a brilliant strategist, a clever planner, or an effective communicator began to earn the respect of the group. The one who could settle disputes without resorting to violence, who could rally people together for a common cause, started to gain true authority. Control became less about random acts of dominance and more about a structured, organized system. This transition from strength to strategy had a profound impact on how human groups functioned. People started to follow leaders not just because they were afraid of them, but because it was practical. They saw that following a good leader improved their chances of survival. An organized group could hunt massive prey that a disorganized mob couldn't. They could defend their territory more effectively, and build more secure settlements. Internal conflicts, which could tear a group apart, were managed and reduced. Obedience was no longer just a forced submission. It became a willing choice based on a clear benefit. Life was simply better and safer under effective leadership. With this new model of organized control, social hierarchies began to form more naturally. It was under just a flat structure, with one dominant individual at the top and everyone else cowering below. Instead, roles and responsibilities started to emerge. You had the leader, or a council of elders, who made the key decisions. Then you might have a group of enforcers, or warriors, who made sure those decisions were followed and protected the group. Others would specialize in hunting, gathering, toolmaking, or childcare. This division of labor was incredibly efficient. It meant that everyone had a role to play, and the group as a whole became stronger and more resilient. Control was no longer a chaotic, unpredictable force. It followed clear patterns and structures that everyone understood. This new dynamic also introduced a crucial concept: accountability. When control is based on fear, the leader doesn't really have to answer to anyone. As long as they remain the strongest, they can do whatever they want. But when leadership is based on providing for the group's survival and well-being, the leader is suddenly accountable for their results. If a leader made a series of bad decisions, if the hunt failed, if the settlement was attacked, if people were starving, their authority would weaken. People would start to question their judgment. This created an early form of a social contract, a system of trust and expectation between the leader and the followers. Control was no longer just a given. It had to be earned and maintained by delivering positive outcomes. It wasn't just about inspiring fear anymore. It was about inspiring confidence. As societies continued to develop, leadership took on an even more sophisticated form. It became symbolic. Instead of having to constantly prove their physical strength or strategic genius, leaders could rely on symbols of their authority. This could be anything from a special title, a ceremonial headdress, a ritual, or a specific tradition that designated someone as the leader. Think of crowns, thrones, or special ceremonies. These symbols meant that power was vested in the position, not just the person. People learned to respect the office of the leader, which made the transfer of power smoother and less violent. It reduced the need for a new leader to physically dominate all rivals to take charge. Authority became institutionalized. This evolution from raw physical strength to symbolic leadership was one of the most important steps toward building civilization. It made control sustainable over the long term. It allowed groups to grow into large tribes and eventually into cities and nations without collapsing into chaos. This groundwork of structured leadership, accountability, and division of labor is the very foundation upon which our modern systems of governance, our institutions, and our organized societies are built. Leadership didn't get rid of problems like inequality or conflict, of course, but it fundamentally transformed how human control worked. It made it possible to create and maintain order on a massive scale. To build the world we live in today, we needed leaders who could manage people, not just dominate them. The journey from muscle to mind, from fear to trust, is what allowed humanity to build a future. The fourth topic is rules that shape the behavior. Ever wondered how humans went from small, chaotic bands of survivors to building massive, organized civilizations? The answer isn't just about strong leaders or brute force. It's about something much more subtle, yet incredibly powerful: rules. Imagine the early days of humanity. Leadership brought some order, but a leader can't be everywhere at once. So, how do you manage a growing group of people when you're not looking? You create rules. These weren't complicated legal documents. They were simple, foundational agreements that defined what was okay and what wasn't. Things like how to share food, who could use certain territories, and what happened when someone broke a promise. These early rules were they established clear expectations. Suddenly, you knew your boundaries, and you knew the consequences for crossing them. This reduced constant conflict and fights over resources. But the real magic of rules was that they made behavior predictable. When you can predict how others will act, you can start to trust them. And trust is the bedrock of cooperation. Without cooperation, building anything larger than a small family unit is nearly impossible. Think about it this way. Fear-based control, the kind a dominant leader uses, only works when the leader is present. The moment they turn their back, chaos can erupt. But rules are different. They exist in the minds of the people. They can be followed even when no one is watching because the group collectively agrees on their importance. Over generations, these rules transformed into ingrained habits, and those habits became the traditions that defined a culture. Now, this doesn't mean punishment disappeared. It was still a crucial part of the system. But it became standardized. Instead of personal revenge or a leader's whim, consequences were based on shared norms. If you stole from someone, the group had an agreed-upon way of dealing with it. This standardization was huge. It dramatically cut down on random violence and blood feuds, making life safer and more stable for everyone. Of course, rules weren't always about fairness for all. They also served to reinforce the existing social hierarchy. One set of rules might apply to the common person, while another, more lenient set, protected the leaders and elites. This was a way of formalizing control, embedding the power structure right into the fabric of daily life. The leader's authority wasn't just personal anymore. It was backed by the system of rules that everyone lived by. As human societies grew from small tribes into larger settlements and eventually cities, these rules had to evolve. They became more complex, branching out into customs, traditions, and the earliest forms of law. These systems were designed to manage behavior on a massive scale, governing everything from trade and marriage to property and crime. It was a societal operating system, and what's one of the most powerful ways to get people to follow rules. Give them a divine or moral purpose. This is where religion often played a massive role. By framing rules as commandments from the gods, or as essential principles of cosmic order, obedience became more than just a social contract. It became a moral duty. This moved control from being a purely external force, like a guard with a spear, to an internal belief system. People followed the rules not just because they feared punishment, but because they genuinely believed it was the right thing to do. This internalizing of rules was a profound shift. It fundamentally shaped how humans thought, acted, and related to one another. Rules dictated family structures, defined roles within the community, and organized labor. The very concept of civilization, as we know it with its cities, agriculture, and specialized jobs depended entirely on these complex systems of rules. It is important to remember that the initial goal of these rules was unnecessarily to create a perfectly fair and equal society. The primary goal was to create order, but from that order, everything else could grow. Order allowed for stability, stability allowed for growth, and growth allowed for increasing complexity and innovation. By shaping individual behavior on a massive scale, rules transformed humanity. We went from being creatures driven primarily by instinct and immediate needs to becoming organized participants in a shared social project. Control was no longer just something imposed from the outside. It became embedded in our daily routines, our beliefs, and our very culture. This stage in our development was absolutely critical. Without the invention of rules, even the most effective leadership would have eventually collapsed under the weight of managing a large population. Rules are what gave civilization its durability. They took the raw concept of control and refined it, turning it into the cultural DNA that continues to shape our world today. Every law we follow, every social norm we observe, every tradition we uphold, is a direct descendant of those first simple rules created by our ancient ancestors. They are the invisible architecture of human society. The fifth topic is control becomes civilization. Have you ever wondered how we went from small, chaotic groups to massive, organized societies? The answer lies in one powerful and often controversial concept: control. It's the invisible force that built our world. And today, we're going to explore how control became civilization. Imagine the earliest human groups. Life was a constant struggle for survival. Control was personal, temporary, and usually maintained through brute force. The strongest individual led, but only until someone stronger came along. This was a world of dominance, not order. But then, something incredible happened. Humans began to create stable leadership and shared rules. Control was no longer just about one person's strength. It became a system. This monumental shift wasn't just a small step forward. It was the very spark that ignited civilization. So, how did this transformation happen? Control became embedded in institutions. Instead of relying on a single, powerful leader, authority was now linked to positions, symbols, and early forms of government. Think of councils of elders, sacred traditions, or the chieftain staff. These weren't just objects or meetings. They were symbols of a new kind of power, a power that lasted beyond any one person's life. People began to obey not just out of fear of immediate punishment, but because following the rules became the new normal. Order had arrived, and it was here to stay. This newfound order was essential for the next giant leap in human history: the rise of cities. You simply can't have a city without control. Imagine thousands of people living together without any rules. It would be pure chaos. Who would ensure there's enough food for everyone? Who would organize the city's defense, who would manage the construction of walls, homes, and temples. All of these complex activities, food distribution, defense, construction, and trade depended on coordinated action. Control was the operating system that made this complexity possible, allowing populations to grow and thrive in ways never before imaginable. As civilizations like ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley expanded, control itself had to evolve. It became more sophisticated, more abstract. Personal judgment from a leader was slowly replaced by a more reliable system: written laws. Think of the Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest and most complete written legal codes. For the first time, rules weren't just spoken, they were carved in stone, creating a permanent record of authority that could be passed down through generations. This meant power could be transferred from one ruler to the next, without the whole society collapsing into chaos. This stability was the secret sauce that allowed empires to grow and cultures to flourish over centuries. But control didn't just organize societies on the outside. It began to shape people's identities on the inside. Individuals started to see themselves based on their role within the larger social structure. You weren't just a person, you were a farmer, a soldier, a priest, or a scribe. Each role came with a set of structured expectations and duties. Of course, this meant individual freedom was limited in ways we might find strange today. You couldn't just decide to change your profession or ignore your responsibilities. But in return for this loss of freedom, people gained something incredibly valuable: security. Life became more predictable, more stable. Now, it's crucial to understand that the arrival of civilized control didn't eliminate violence. Far from it. Instead, it organized it. Violence became a tool of the state. Wars were no longer random skirmishes. They were planned campaigns with strategic objectives. Punishments were no longer acts of personal revenge. They were regulated procedures carried out by the authorities. Power and the violence used to maintain it were justified through powerful narratives, divine right, sacred tradition, or philosophical ideologies. Control, in essence, made violence predictable and gave it a purpose, for better or for worse. It was a monopoly on force held by the ruling power. Over a very long period, perhaps the most fascinating change occurred. Control became internal. Humans started to police their own behavior. The constant presence of a guard or a king wasn't necessary anymore. Instead, feelings like shame, loyalty, and duty, along with deeply held religious or cultural beliefs, guided people's actions. We learned to self-regulate. Civilization came to depend just as much on this internal self-control as it did on external laws and armies. We followed the rules not just because we had to, but because we believed we should. This internalization of control is one of the most powerful forces holding modern societies together. Of course, this entire evolutionary process came at a cost. The same systems of control that created order also created inequality. Those who designed and managed the systems, the rulers, priests, and bureaucrats, held immense power over everyone else. Hierarchies became rigid. Civilization brought incredible progress, technology, and art. But it also brought class divisions and social stratification. The farmer who produced the food was rarely as powerful as the official who managed its distribution. This is a fundamental paradox of civilization, the trade-off between individual liberty and collective security. Yet, despite these costs, it's undeniable that without control, civilization as we know it simply could not exist. The roads we drive on, the cities we live in, the vast libraries of knowledge we've accumulated, and the rich cultures we cherish, all of these achievements require limits on individual behavior for the good of the group. Control is what transformed the raw, desperate struggle for survival into the complex, interconnected tapestry of society. And this isn't just ancient history. Look around you. Our modern world is built directly on these ancient foundations. Our laws, governments, economic systems, and even our unspoken social norms are all highly evolved extensions of those first attempts to manage chaos and create order. The fundamental tension hasn't gone away. We still grapple with the same essential questions. How much control is too much? Where is the line between order and oppression? The story of civilization is the story of this ongoing negotiation. So, the ultimate question isn't whether control exists, it's a fundamental part of any large-scale society. The real question is how we choose to use it. By understanding how our ancestors first learned to harness control, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves, our societies, and the fragile, ever-shifting balance between order and freedom that continues to define the human journey. Thanks for watching. If you found this exploration of history and human nature fascinating, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world. See ya next time.